The Russian war costs become ever higher, especially as the income is diminishing. The Russians compensate this with the biggest attack from the air of the war so far. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this SITREP about the war in Ukraine. The Russians have done the biggest attack on the Ukrainians from the air so far. 574 drones were used, 4 Kinshal, 2 Iskander ballistic missile, 19 Kh-101 cruise missile, and 14 Caliber cruise missiles as well. Another unidentified missile was launched from the Crimean Peninsula. According to the Ukrainians, they managed to intercept 546 drones, 1 of the Kinshals, 18 Kh-101 and 12 Calibers. 11 targets were hit after all, though. One of them was a US enterprise, the Flex Electronics company in Mukachevo. A huge fire has started and 19 of the employees were injured. The company is in private property from a US company, and it is producing items like coffee makers, according to the Ukrainian president. In response to that, Donald Trump got really mad and posted this on Truth Social. That it's unfair and that the Ukrainians, you can't expect the Ukrainians not hitting back when being attacked. And afterwards, he apparently allowed the usage of HIMARS against the oil industry, as a strike was then done against a Druzhba oil pipeline position there in Bryansk. This is in HIMARS range, and according to analysts, likely HIMARS was used for the first time for a target like this, which was not allowed under Zelensky. The Russians are claiming that they destroyed the production facilities for the Krim 2. I have no proof whatsoever, so no idea whether that's true or not. The Ukrainians struck other targets, though, as well. The Novoshachinsky, something like this, refinery in Rostov is hit and was burning for several times, but the Ukrainians lost a plane too. A MiG-29 crashed when landing. The pilot died in the incident. We'll switch to the developments along the front line, and here we have the Russians advancing a little bit in the Sumy region. Here at Yunakivka, we have the Russians in the southern part of Yunakivka. As you can see, those are two fresh geolocations. Basically, at these positions here, we have fresh Russian presence. According to the Ukrainians, the Russians attack 5 times a day and use 30 to 50 glide bombs in this area. That's it from Sumy, and we switch to Kharkiv, and it's the same here. No change in territory, nothing that can be observed in important news here. We switch to the Eastern Front, and here the Russians managed to gain additional ground along the line here. In the direction of Yampil, they more or less straightened out the front line. That could just be corrections of the map by, according to withdrawals from the Ukrainians, or because some of the areas were never occupied by them. But by now, the front line has moved closer to the Sherebets in this, the confirmed front line. That was it north of the Seversky Donetsk. In the direction of Seversk, we have reports of up to 150 usage of drones of the FPV type, FPV size drones by the Russians in this area per day, up to 150, but no change in territory. Coming closer to Kostiantynivka, we have the Russians bypassing Chasiv Yar and advancing roughly 2.5 kilometers to the northwest. We have that geolocated, so the Russians are bypassing Chasiv Yar and using the high ground to the northwest of it. Further south, the Russians have been seen and geolocated in new positions here along the canal and in the northeastern part of Oleksandro Shultyne. We have that here, so this is the Russians roughly here and more or less here at this point. So further Russian advances, and in a follow-on geolocation from today, we have the Russians a little further in Oleksandro Shultyne. In the last one they were here, now they are here at this point. The Russians have also advanced to here In this direction, north of Shcherbinivka, the Russians have reached this point here. We see that the Shcherbinivka pocket is increasingly being pushed in. The Russians are now roughly at this point here, coming closer to Katerinivka from the east. That's it from the Kostiantynivka direction. We move to the Pokrovsk direction, and here the Russians have advanced north of Poltavka. They have reached this point here. We have that geolocated. At this point here, the Russians have reached this recently. The Ukrainians have been successful too, though. They have... we're not there yet, I'm sorry. The Russians first have advanced towards closer to Mirnograd, and that is increasingly going to be a problem as they are here right at the outskirts of Mirnograd. You can see this is not built up area yet, but they are just a few hundred meters away from the first houses of Mirnograd. From the north, this is the Russians now being at this point visually confirmed. The Ukrainians have been pushed back in Udachne here. We talked about it in the past, how important Udachne is to defend the lines of communication into Pokrovsk area. Now the Russians have been spotted here, the northern part, but this was from the 21st. And we have now one from the 22nd, and there the Ukrainians are in the south. So either the front line is not really straight, or the Ukrainians managed to push the Russians back again inside of Udachne. So we have visual confirmation that Udachne is definitely still fully contested. That was it from the Pokrovsk region. We have advances, changes in the Dnieper direction. And here we actually have a couple of Ukrainian successes. First of all, northwest of Yalta, the Russians are advancing. We have them here in the northern area along the river here, along the Vovcha. They have advanced to this and probably captured all south of the Vovcha here. The Ukrainians have advanced, though, into Seleni High and have raised their flag. So it's likely that Seleni High was liberated by the Ukrainians. And later we had visual evidence of the Ukrainians also raising their flag inside of Tolstoy. So Tolstoy might be liberated by now as well. We talked about it in the past that raising a flag does not necessarily mean that they weren't pushed back later again and things like this, but the indications are that the Ukrainians might have actually pushed the Russians back. We had the same in Alexandrograd and in Iskra here. So in this region, apparently the Ukrainians are currently doing small counteroffensive moves that have at least some success. Further south, we have the Russians in Novoheorivka. We have that geolocated as well at this point. This is a little hard to find. I hope I'll find it quickly enough on the map. This should be here. Yeah, exactly here. The Russians have entered it. Whether or not they fully control it is too early to say. And the Russians also entered Ternyrivka. Ternyrivka is not far further south, west of Selenopole. So here, Ternyrivka is probably under Russian control by now. So some mixed bag in this direction. Ukrainians are successful in the northern area, but not in the southern area. Ukrainian special forces have also attacked a train with fuel in Tsankoy on the Crimean Peninsula. They were attacked with drones. Where the special forces were is unknown. To which degree that was the control was from the Ukrainian held territory or even from within Russian held territory is unclear. But another railroad, another train was destroyed there. The overall situation is mostly unchanged. The Ukrainians are having some successes in this area while they're being pushed back at this area. Here in the north, the situation north of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd is still not really cleared for the Ukrainians yet. They've managed to push the Russians back a little bit from Dobropilia, but the Russians definitely had some success roughly in this area, while the Ukrainians had some success in the northern area. Whether or not and to which degree the Ukrainians managed to push the Russians back south is unclear as of now, even though we have visual evidence of recent successes. Other than that, the overall situation hasn't really changed. Then we have news about troop generation. A Ukrainian veteran, or the Ukrainians took someone prisoner, and in an interview he said that he is a Ukrainian veteran who was forced to fight for the Russians before the full-scale invasion. He fought against the Russians in the initial invasions, or probably in 2014 and 15, but according to him, the police had placed drugs in his house, and he was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison, and then they forced him to fight for Russia instead. Obviously, there are questions about his credibility. There are probably some former veterans that do drug dealing, and whether or not he was forced or just offered as an alternative to fight for the Russians instead of serving 12.5 years is a different question, and one that I can't answer for you. The only thing I want to add to this is that obviously we should not believe anything. If you see that a former Ukrainian soldier is now fighting for the Russians and then being captured by the Ukrainians, he definitely would have a lot of incentives to give a very good explanation why he switched sides, to not be punished for that as well. So yeah, let's leave it at that. The Russian police is being ordered now to hand everyone who is imprisoned a contract for the Ministry of Defense for the Russian Armed Forces as an alternative for being prosecuted. So basically everyone who is getting arrested is being told, hey, by the way, you can stop all of this by just signing up for the military. And the interesting part is the policemen receive a bonus if one of the prisoners signs up, which would obviously make it attractive to use coercion. Then we have the Russians using their reconnaissance drones, the Orlan 10, as motherships for FPV drones. This is now visually confirmed, which also means that obviously the Russians are able to use FPV drones further inside the Ukrainian-held territory. In the political sphere, we have some news as well. Lavrov is once again emphasizing that there will only be security guarantees with Russia. Like I said before, Article 5 is possible, but only with Russia as a guarantor, and thus worthless for Ukraine. That the Russians would suddenly accept an Article 5 comparison is pointless unless they are the one who can block it, and that was never anything was never seriously to be expected. Then we have Reuters reporting that Russia is about to increase the taxes and reduce its expenses because of economic problems due to the financing of the war and the sanctions. This is obviously increasing the pressure against the Russian population, which is one of the steps that is needed to make Russia willing to make peace without continuing to aim for a Ukrainian capitulation. And one of the things here is, while the Indians keep buying oil, the article here mentions that they buy it with a discount. So Russia has to sell oil cheaper than the usual world market price to make India buy it, which obviously is reducing its income. Of course, at the same time, we have no signs whatsoever that Putin is willing to meet up with Zelensky. With that, he would give Ukraine and its president's legitimacy, and that was not to be expected. That was it from me for today already. If you like the SITREP, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have something to add. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.